Wow. So I just finished editing up the podcast that you're about to watch or listen to, and I have to say it's definitely one of my favorites. If not, it's my favorite. It has me just thinking so much about the potential of the future and what I could be doing with my garden. Our guest is literally the reason we use techniques like fresh frozen. This episode is absolutely packed with the complete history of Solventless Extract, how we got to where we are today. We dive into the evolution of the equipment, and how homegrowers like myself, or maybe you watching this, how we could be using Solventless Extract to step up our game. Other cool stuff like top strains for Solventless, and tons of other tips and tricks. So guys, make sure you stick around to the end. Drop a like, drop a comment already, because this one is absolute fire. And before we jump into this, I want to make sure that we thank our sponsor, AC Infinity. They're the ones that make the 5x10 tent and all the tech I need to grow these 12 beauties right here. The episode you're about to listen to got me so excited about Solventless Extract that I'm considering turning all 12 into some kind of solventless extraction. The 3 AC Infinity S44s, 400 watt LEDs I set up in here are doing a fantastic job. These buds are exploding in trichome production, and it's just week 5 of flower. The signature AC inline fans, oscillating clip fans, and controller 69 are doing a bang up job of giving plenty of air movement and keeping my parameters right where I need them. It's easy to say that AC Infinity has quickly become my favorite grow tent and tech company to use for my own personal grows here on the channel. Save a nice chunk of change using discount code HomeGrowTV on the website or code HomeGrowTV10 on Amazon. All right, let's jump into the podcast. Nikka T, my brother, thank you, bro, for coming to the podcast. What is up, my dude? It's been a minute since I seen you. How you been, and where have you been since I seen you last, brother?
Oh man, I'm feeling pretty blessed, man. Thank you so much for having me on your podcast here, man. It means a lot. Since Colombia, because that's where I saw you
Yep.
last, I believe, I have been all over the place.
That's what I seen, dude.
Yeah, I can't even keep track, man. I was all over South America. I went back to South America. Um, Man, I have been all over the US, lots of consult clients. Just finished up a class here in Denver. Road life, definitely road
I
life. People
see
keep
that,
asking
bro.
me where I live, and I say the road. And it's really truthful because some months I maybe get a day or 2 days out of the month at my own house. So, yeah.
Right. Dude, I've seen that, man. I seen you. That's where we met originally, was here in Colombia, guys, for those of you listening. And ever since I kept in touch and just following you on social media, it's sick because I've seen you moving around, so active, so much education, classes, and different stuff that you're doing. For those that are tuned in right now that might not know who you are, some of your history, how you got into the extraction game. Again, we're sitting, guys, with a true expert, been here for a while. Why don't you paint a little picture of some of that for those who might not know you?
Yes. So I am very transparent and available. My name is Nick Tannum, but I go by Nikka T. I grew up in California, Northern California to be specific, where cannabis was extremely prevalent in my upbringing. So cannabis and hashish specifically was very accepted by my family, which is, not as common for everyone. So I
Right.
feel
That's
extremely
cool.
blessed to have that support system. I mean, shit, still to this day, every time I make a post on Instagram, it goes to Facebook, and my mom's on Facebook liking the post and
That's sick.
commenting every fucking time.
Yeah.
And I'm not mad about it. Some people are like, that's goofy, and I think it's fucking cool. I'm stoked
Yeah,
to
no
have the
doubt.
support like that from day one. So yeah, growing up in Northern California, cannabis was in my upbringing. I had family members and friends of families that had cannabis farms up in Humboldt and Mendocino.
Sick.
I smoked from a very young age and got really into hashish from a young age. And I started really focusing in on that path specifically. I traveled to Amsterdam in the early 2000s and studied under Mila Jansen, also known as the
Beautiful.
Hash Queen. And
Right.
Mila taught me a lot. I bugged her, and I say studied under her. That's just, a fancy way of saying I pulled up at her warehouse and I bugged her every single day for 10 hours a day in
Wow.
her warehouse. Because back then she had a shop where she had a little seshing area with all kinds of artifacts and Moroccan pipes, and you could see people's hash samples from all around the world taped up to this one wall. And then in
That's
the back,
sick.
she sold and had her warehouse for all of her isolator and bubbleator equipment. She also had
Right.
like a coca plant where she was growing a coca plant in a greenhouse back there.
That's
She's
sick.
just an amazing woman, all around. So I just fell in love. Mila's my
Yeah.
mentor. And when I first met her, I was like, okay, I'm going to spend every day here as long as I can until she kicks me out, because everything that's coming out of this woman's mouth is gold. And a lot of
Wow.
what she spread to me back then was not written down in any book.
Right.
This is the early 2000s. This is before Instagram,
Mm-hmm.
and before a lot of people started sharing this
Yeah.
technology. People were still hiding, and still people are hiding, depending on where you're at. But
Right. Right.
Mila taught me a ton. So I took from what I learned from Mila in Amsterdam, and I took that back to the US, and I started making hash in the early 2000s. At that point, I was living in Colorado. I had just started college,
Mm-hmm.
and I had already finished junior college. I transferred in as a junior or something, and I was already selling a lot of cannabis. And now I had some skills to elevate my hash game, if you will, because I was already making a little bit of hash, but there were certain things that Mila taught me that really, really elevated my game. And I
I
brought
can
those
imagine.
traditions to the traditional market in Colorado, and then eventually moved back to the Bay Area and started selling to 215 license shops before recreational came into play in California. Shops like the Vapor Room
Yeah.
was like my main home spot, where I was cool with the security guards, because the same security guards at the vape room were the same security guards at the clubs that I was passing out flyers in, or DJing at, or
That's sick.
working in. So it
What a time.
brought the entire thing kind of all together. The music game and the hash community and the cannabis community all kind of came together for me in Northern California, Colorado, and Amsterdam, and that was my
That's
triangle.
sick. That's sick, man. What a mentor to have. I had the blessings to very briefly get to meet Mila the Hash Queen. She came to a Cannabis Cup last December here in Colombia, blessed this amazing country with her presence and knowledge, and just giving back to a lot of these people who are just so dedicated, like these hash heads dedicated to the extraction game like yourself. And it was just like she just holds this presence and this aura around her of just so much love and passion for, especially for hash, of course, like it's just so cool. So
Oh,
it's such
she's
an
still a tough puffer too. She'll outsmoke
yeah.
most.
Right. Yeah, no doubt. Oh my God, what a cool guest and someone to talk to at some point, and what a great mentor. For those listening, I definitely recommend like you go into this and you have such an in-depth. I think you guys were hanging out for like almost 2 hours on a podcast you did, like the Hashish Inn, I think, which is a great reference for people to want to dive deeper into Nikka T's story. You go deep in there, and I thought that was cool. And also the Ganjiro, I thought was a really cool interview that you did, where you touch on that. How did that lead to, like, with your story and the journey, again, taking part in such a big history of this revolution, this evolution going on now, getting into the extraction game? What's up with your essential extracts? That's your company, right? And how did you get into that? What's the purpose of that company? What do you guys do there?
Yeah, no. Essential Extracts is the first tax-paying licensed hash company in the United States. It
Wow, I
has
didn't know
been
that.
a tough road. It has not been an easy road. To be that first person, I had to stick my ass out there.
No
I was the
shit.
guy contacting the Department of Revenue, being like, hey, I want to do this legally. I moved
Right.
back to Colorado because I want to sleep at night. I've got a kid.
Right.
I'm tired of hiding. Like, I was literally vocal about it.
Beautiful.
Until, finally I talked to the right people and the right avenues. And then, of course, regulations came into play in Colorado, which really allowed me to protect myself. And the reason I moved back to Colorado is because I heard Colorado was the place that was going to allow for more protection. Just to back it up a little bit, I
Mm-hmm.
started up a warehouse in Oakland, California back in 2008, 2009.
Got you.
Right as I thought 215 was transferring into something bigger. And
Mm-hmm.
in, I guess, a little bit of a gray area, I opened up shop, and I opened up shop on a big level. And instantly, upon getting a power upgrade from PG&E, I remember the
Mm-hmm.
guys coming over there. They must have called the cops on me because the
No
second
shit.
PG&E came to pull up, the cops came with them. And they were basically like, hey, we've been watching you. We know who you are. We know what you do. Why don't you go back to Colorado? That's where you're going to operate safely. And I was like, fuck, okay. So I
No
packed up my
shit.
shit and I lost a ton of money because PG&E still charged
Wow.
me.
Oh yeah,
It
yeah,
was
of course. Hey,
it
they're
was a
good.
big upgrade.
Yeah.
And
Wow.
yeah, just lost a lot of money in preparation for that early on, and came out to Colorado. And at the time, I had a good friend who, back in the day in college, he was crashing on my couch, and we
Mm-hmm.
were helping him out. He calls me up and he's like, "Hey, man, I opened up one of the first dispensaries in Colorado. I don't know what I'm doing. I see you're out there at Vapor Room and you're working with these security guards. Can you come and help implement some of this knowledge into the shop?" And I'm like, "Sure."
Right.
Um, yeah, and actually, I mean, I think at that very moment when he asked me to come out back to Colorado, I was living in Portland, Oregon at the time. I had just had a kid, and Portland, Oregon at that time was tough to survive in. It was like second to Detroit, Michigan, and educated, impoverished individuals. It was not an easy place to live. A beautiful,
Right.
cool, hipster place to live, but just not easy. And so I got this phone call to go back to Colorado and help somebody run a shop, and I was like, all right, I'm on it.
Yeah.
When I came back to Colorado, the shop was up in Vail, which is a real small mountain town. And as a DJ, I needed a little bit more. So I operated that shop and I helped implement a lot over the first year. Um, I grew out of that shop, if you will. I grew out of not even really the shop, I grew out of that town. And I needed to get back
Mm-hmm.
to a big city. And that's when I kind of had the idea to start Essential Extract. So I moved back down to Denver. And as I preface, man, I might be long-winded and high-strung because I am not smoking weed. So just slow me
No,
down if
you're
I'm
good, bro. This is
going
sick.
too
I'm
hard.
intrigued. I'm like here with you right now, following this, dude. This is
Cool.
so interesting, brother.
So
To get to that. Keep
I get
going.
back down to Denver and I start reaching out to the IRS. I start reaching out to the Department of Revenue, just trying to pull strings and get in. Because
Mm-hmm.
I start hearing about licensing now, and I'm like, okay, like it's my time. Get down to Denver, and I I mean, shit, I guess it's a little foggy because it's way back then and I was smoking a lot, but little
Yeah.
bit of the story's foggy. We were dropping at shops before licensing really came in. That's also why it's foggy because it was slightly gray area
Right.
before the real laws came in 2010, I believe. It was 2010 was the first medical laws. But before that, there were still medical dispensaries in Colorado. They just weren't fully legal. It was a little weird.
Right.
So those not fully legal medical dispensaries, I was driving weed, and I'm going to be loud about this. I always have been, but I was driving weed from California to Colorado because I had my plugs and my family and all that out in
Right.
California, where we grew on a lot larger of a level than the small indoor grows here in Colorado did at that
Yeah.
time. And so I'm bringing pounds and pounds of hash back. And I'm hitting all of these medical shops. Like back then, there was this Green Mile on Broadway, which it still exists here in
Yeah.
Colorado, but there's less shops. But there was like a free for all, wild, wild west. And so I hit all these shops in a row on Broadway with a duffel bag and a knife on my hip, just
No
dropping
shit.
hash. And
Shut up,
that's
dude.
really
No
how
shit.
Essential was born. That's how I funded it. Um,
Wow.
Unfortunately, because I was loud about wanting to pay taxes and because I funded my company, I guess not so above board, um, eventually the IRS kind of came after me pretty hard and back taxed
Right.
me to like, fuck, way
Mm.
back, well before regulations and legalization, if you will, and called me
Wow.
a drug trafficker. So I am a
Yeah.
drug
No
trafficker,
shit.
according to the IRS, and that's what I get for being loud and being the first person to do it.
Yeah.
But I'm proud of it. I don't know if
No
it's
doubt.
been,
Takes
you
balls,
know,
brother. No doubt.
financially beneficial to be loud in the first, but it's been fun. It's been a ride. I love what
Right.
I do each and every day, and I'm blessed to still be here.
Do you think part of like and just to go off that because it's so amazing the start that you have with like the amazing level of knowledge coming in with your mentors and this and getting into this and into this, do you think that brought to your confidence to be that first person to go there? Like you just were so certain that it was going to, you know, like, where did that come from? Or do
Yeah,
you just
yeah,
think you
yeah.
would
I'll
have done
let you
that
know where it
anyway?
came from. No, so my dad worked in banking,
Yeah.
still does. That's really all I'm going to mention about him. I don't need to bring him into this situation any further than I already have. But he told me when I was 12 or 13 years old, 13, 14 years old, maybe, when I first started selling weed, and I first started bringing weed back to the house and money back to the house.
Yeah.
And they weren't really cool with that. My parents were like, hey, we're supportive, but don't bring this business back here.
Right.
And my dad, eventually, I kind of moved out and, became more independent and was doing my business and would go and visit my parents and be like, hey, Dad, I'm still doing it. and, and he just was like, man, I love what you're doing, but I just really want you to be safe. And this isn't safe. I want you to make sleep at night money. I want you to be safe. And so really that's the reason I moved back to Colorado. That's the reason I was blowing up the IRS, because
Got you.
I wanted to sleep at night. I had a kid. I
Yeah.
wanted to be safe. I went through all the hoops, or I wanted to go through all the hoops, because there were a lot more hoops, and there still are, to be safe and to do
Yeah.
things legitimately and to continue being loud about it. I wanted to be an educator. I was on every radio show, every podcast that first came out. Because in Colorado, when licensing first dropped, we could advertise. California in 215 days, there were no billboards. We were not allowed to advertise on social media. So when
Right.
licensing first came out in Colorado, it was a free for all, and they allowed it. So I was fucking charging.
Yeah. That is sick, dude. I'm so glad we went into that, because I think the history is, and it just gives me so much respect, brother, to hear what you've gone through. It takes balls to do that. Not everyone is cut out for that. And for you to pioneer in that sense, it's just, honestly, dude, respects and props to that, dude. It's really cool. And to bring it to a place now, again, why we're here, to talk about the extraction side of things, for those tuning in, again, on the newer side, and not to spend too much time on the history of it, because for a lot of it's really new, right? It's really new. And for some of us, it's something we only seen pop up in the dispensaries, or it was something we seen pop up on YouTube. Or we tried our first dab, for some of us recently. This whole extraction thing has come really quickly. Give us a quick little briefing on the history 101. Where did it start, and kind of where are we now on this solventless extraction?
Well, it really, solventless or mechanical separation started hundreds of years ago. And I'm not going to really get into that deep history too much. I'd love
Mm-hmm.
everyone to do some research and do some more research into,
Right.
the hash world in Afghanistan and Morocco and India, and getting up further into Nepal. There's some cool stuff. And regionally, hashish is different. And that's really the main thing that I'll touch on about past, is that generally speaking, you saw flowers in equatorial regions. And then once you
Mm-hmm.
got into those drier, colder, more extreme climates, you started to see hashish being produced.
Right.
So think about it: warm, hot, humid, moist climates, flowers are grown, and that's where flowers are known for being cultivated, equatorial regions. And then you get
Mm-hmm.
into like Morocco and Nepal, and the hash in India, just as an example. There's not really too much hash made in the south, in Kerala. It's that hot, humid environment where you're growing flowers. Most of the hash is
Gotcha.
made up in the north, where it gets dry and cold and extreme. Um, and it changes the type of hash that you make, whether it's dry sieve or, finger rubbed charas. But that's really all I want to touch on about the past. Moving into New World hash is what we've been
Mm-hmm.
calling it. Really, I saw a huge need. I was making bubble hash when bubble hash
Yeah.
was a popular term, and it's still a popular term throughout the world.
Right.
But there came a point where I was bringing my hash to the dispensaries in Colorado, and I was calling it bubble hash.
Mm-hmm.
And they were like, no, this isn't bubble hash. They just, there was this one point where we got to a certain quality standard, and the bud tenders were like, this looks completely different than this brown, pliable, mildew smelling bubble hash that's on my shelf. I can't call yours bubble hash if it's going to sit next to this bubble hash on my shelf. People will
Right.
be confused. So
Yeah.
bud tenders pushed me to create a term. That's really what happened, to separate my product from the rest.
Yeah.
At that time, I was hanging out with a YouTube phenomenon named Paul Token.
Mm-hmm.
I'd say Paul Token was the very first cannabis influencer, if you ask me.
Interesting.
Hanging out with this guy because, like I mentioned, I wanted to be involved in all the podcasts, all the radio. I just wanted to be at the forefront of this.
Yeah.
And Paul Token was the forefront. And I brought some of my product to him, and he's like, bro, this ain't bubble hash. He's like, it looks like butane. And at that time, there were a few terms for butane. This is like 2010, 2011. And those terms for butane back then were butane honey oil, BHO, and earwax were pretty much the two main terms. There's been such a sequence of terminology, transpirings. I don't know what the word I'm looking for, but earwax and BHO are the main, or honey oil. Sorry, honey oil, earwax, BHO are the main terms back then. And Paul Token's like, man, this looks like earwax. Let's try and dab it like we're doing. Back then it was hot knives, and it was like the very onset of, it was skillets. So I don't know if you guys are familiar with the whole hack. Hold on 1 second.
Yeah. I've got to see this because I definitely know the hot knives. That I'm definitely familiar with.
And then like one of the first methods of dabbing.
So this came after, obviously blades would have been, hot knives. I call them blades. In Canada, we call them blades. That was my first little hash shoot, right? Get it done. And obviously those two blades got kept and hidden from mom. And those were, those things were stained black. So this was a technique that was after.
Right after. I'd say it was the first
got you.
method of vaporization via a glowing red hot utensil. Because back then we didn't know about temp timers and gauges and dab rights and you name it. So people would make these things pretty glowing red hot. We were taking 900 to 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit dabs for sure.
Oh, dude, just these hot and heavy.
So this is the skillet. I should show you in the actual case that I have it in here. Because it's
wow, it looks like a ring almost. Like
ring display case here. This one might have been from Task. I can't remember. Oh yeah, let's see. Yeah, this one is from Hetty TI. So this was a little bit later rendition where they started making them like Hetty and engraving them and stuff with wigwags. Yeah, Hetty TI. And this would actually connect to the neck of a glass tube, and then that neck would come into a bell shaped that went over this. So you would heat this up from the bottom, slide it under that bell, and then take your dabber and get your stuff in there while it was still red hot, and that cone or that bell hanging out over this would suck up anything into your rig. If that makes sense.
That's crazy. Yeah.
So I guess where were we going with this? This is really the onset of dabbing, and Paul Token and I were hanging out, and I give him some of my product, and he tries it on one of these skillets, and he's like, holy fuck, bro, it barely leaves any residue compared to like the bubble hash that he was trying to dab. He's like, this is earwax, man. I was like, no, it's not, bro. I didn't use any butane. And he's like, And then he literally, I'm pretty sure he was the first one. Maybe I called it Solventless first. I still don't remember. But we were together that day. And he's like, man, this is Solventless wax. Or I said, this is Solventless wax. Yeah. Either way, I give him a lot of credit because we were hanging out.
And, either way, it came out that day, huh? Right there, the term.
Solventless wax came out that day. And now this is before the umbrella term solventless, if you will. Because we were just trying to mimic something that was dabbable, trying to recreate something that was dabbable without the use of any chemical solvents. So that day we coined the term solventless wax. From there, butane hash oil continued on its upward path, and new consistencies came out in that world. It wasn't just earwax type of consistency anymore. Now this sugar started coming out. This crystalline form started coming out, and shatter really was the most popular widespread technology term and therefore consistency that started hitting the
Right.
market. And
Yeah.
so we kind of went back to the drawing board, and I was like, well, we recreated solventless earwax. I want to make solventless shatter. And then,
Right.
as butane hash oil makers started making, diamonds, and as they started making other consistencies, batter consistencies, I sought out to recreate those consistencies without the means or use of any chemical solvents. And
So
eventually
cool.
we recreated all the consistencies that we were seeing in the butane world and kind of utilized the overhead umbrella term solventless to encompass not only all these interesting consistencies we were making with water hash, but also to umbrella dry sift or keef,
Yep.
to umbrella all these other mechanical forms of separation of extracts, cannabis extracts.
Just to touch back again on the history, or as far as like the technology, where it started and where it got to, like you guys were starting with like hair press at that point, right? Or what was the first type of machines you were working with as far as to extract from your ice extraction?
So that's to move it actually about 5 years forward. So we were coining these terms and making these products before rosin existed. We
Got
were
you.
just utilizing different methods of post processing without any heat, or there was some heat towards the end of it. And as we got towards that end, you know, I remember this gentleman named Compassion,
Uh-huh.
compassion, but with hash in the word,
Yeah.
on fullmeltbubble.com and some of the other forums. And I actually remember he was the gentleman who first used the term rosin to describe a cannabis extract. And
Got you.
in a very crude, raw way, it was the very first rosin was what Compassion made, or Compassion. I can't pronounce it very well. It spells out better than it's pronounced. But
Yeah.
this guy is still around. So if you guys get a chance, write on this guy's Facebook wall.
Hmm.
He goes by Chadwick Bastardo on Facebook, but he was the original Compassion, and he was the original guy who originally coined the term rosin for a cannabis extract. The term rosin existed
Huge.
well before that for like a resin type consistency. They used it in the music world for lubing up your corks with a
Right.
rosin, et cetera, for a long, long time. But utilizing it in the cannabis space, Compassion was the first to use it. Now, flash forward to 2000, what is it, 14? Um, in fact, there's some videos on YouTube about the history of rosin that people can reference for this story. I
Hmm.
always like to give credit to Phil, to Soil Grown, for really bringing rosin to a commercial level, because I do give credit to
Gotcha.
Compassion for coining that term. But to
Hmm.
scale up rosin, Compassion made it in a stainless steel bowl with a stainless steel spoon, and he was pressing bubble hash with a warm and a stainless steel bowl and a warm stainless steel spoon. And what he saw on the outside of that bubble hash was this ring of oil. He would then
Yeah.
just scrape that ring and take a knife hit of it, because that's what was back then. And he was like, man, this left zero residue. We were looking for full melt clear dome. This was past full melt clear dome. This
Right.
was water. So everyone's freaking out over these posts.
Yeah.
But then fast forward, Phil, is really the first time I thought that that term rosin was going to be something that was scalable in our industry. I saw this guy on Instagram or Facebook or wherever it was, taking a
Hmm.
hair straightener and pressing flowers and extruding the
Right.
oil from the flowers and scraping that oil and making rosin on a larger level. And he was like collecting parchment. And I was like, oh shit, he's making it for other people. Because back when Compassion coined the term, that was something for us, just us hash makers. We would make bubble hash for our client, and then we'd make a little
Right.
bit of rosin for our heads.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until I saw Phil doing it, that I thought, ding, 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 this is now scalable. Phil will tell you that he didn't think it was scalable until he saw my employees in our lab using a hair straightener on our bubble hash. So
Wow.
Sam, aka Yo's Dankest, aka Samwise Ganji, aka Mile High Melts,
Yeah.
who at the time was my lead extractor in the Essential Extracts lab in Colorado. The man was always ahead of the game, and he was always doing a ton of research and development. And yeah, he was pressing bubble hash in a hair straightener and
Mm-hmm.
flagging it out and dabbing the bubble hash or water hash, or at that point we were calling it solventless or solventless shatter.
Yeah.
Um, all very synonymous yet slightly different terms, depending on the person you talk to. And so Phil is like trying to give credit to Sam. I'm trying to give credit to Phil. It's all a big family. And that's
Right.
what has brought it to this level, is the fact that none of us just hoarded that technology. We were all
Amazing.
finding this out as we went. That's what research and development was all about for me. And as we were developing these new technologies, we were sharing them. And
Yeah.
that's, I think, what's created this tight knit community and such a massive, real, true community. Because when I created that term solventless, I did not think that it was going to create a community like this. I thought I was using it to separate myself
Yeah.
from the rest of the
Right.
community, really. So,
Yeah.
take for it as you will. But it was initially a selfish move to coin the term solventless. But real
Right.
quick after I coined that term, I start seeing other people and then other entities or companies start coming out the gate. I'm making solventless. I'm like, oh, well, initially I made this term to separate myself, but now if it's spreading like this, I think I should teach people about it so everyone knows about solventless and
Right.
everyone buys our solventless. And that's what I did. I started teaching everyone. There was no competition for me.
Which
I
is
wanted
sick.
to
Because then you
teach
start seeing
everyone.
products, the products that have come out specifically for solventless, right? Not only were you seeing a bunch of solventless coming out, now you got like products directed for the consumption of it in the best way, the most efficient way. And it's crazy to see the leaps and jumps we've seen on the last few devices,
Yeah.
as far as taking some dabs.
Consumption and
I haven't,
production. The
right,
actual production
exactly.
side's
Oh my,
crazy.
dude, and a quick shout out to anyone listening to this or watching on the YouTube side. Definitely got to check out the Instagram, Nikka T's Instagram, because just checking out the stories on a daily basis or the posts, it's so cool to see the tech side, what's going on. It really is a great place to like be able to just see stuff on kind of like a behind the scenes style thing. But a question I have for you, like, let's just imagine for a second that we're two buddies and I'm just the home grower, that I'm the passionate for my flower, and I'm hunting my terps and I'm pheno hunting. I got my thing on my home grower. Right. And you're Nikka T and and you do what you do and you have all this expertise. Not that you need to convince me, but what are some of the ways as a buddy that you would explain to me with excitement, like why I should be looking into researching, educating myself, or maybe even experimenting in my garden with solventless methods or solventless extraction methods?
The first thing that comes to my mind is most markets, the flower price. Even if you're a home grower, I think some markets are allowing the home grower to be able to distribute or sell or donate, however you want to say it.
Mm-hmm.
But in most markets, I'm seeing the price of flower just tank. And now in some markets, it's coming back up. It's definitely an ebb and flow. But there was a while there where that flower price tanked. And there was a nice bit there as well where the rosin price stayed the same. So, from a
Right.
financial standpoint, I would learn about rosin as the
Interesting.
market evolves. Rosin is that evolution. But then also from a medical patient standpoint, you get to a point where you can smoke all the flower in the world and your tolerance just increases, increases, increases. And there's a point where you might need concentrates to
Right.
really help with the reason you started smoking cannabis. And maybe that reason you thought it was medical, or maybe you thought it was recreational, but it ends up being really a medical reason if you break it down and think about it. Maybe it just makes you feel better. Maybe it's supplying a better quality of life on your last legs. There's so many different reasons that people use cannabis, and there gets to be a point where your tolerance gets high, and
Right.
the flowers aren't going to do it for you, or they're not going to get you to that point, that place you need to be. So concentrates are a great way of getting to that point. Also,
Yeah.
flowers are stinky, hard to travel with. So the first and original reason that hashish was created was for import and export reasons, plain and simple. It was a lot harder to travel or import or export bales of
No
cannabis
shit.
compared
Right.
to bricks of hashish.
Yeah.
So, taking it back to that history question, hashish really came about initially due to transport need.
That's sick, dude. Yeah, I always think about that as a bonus, right? Like, always have one of these, and like if we're on a road trip or going somewhere, and now, and leading into the next question, actually, here in Colombia, you've seen it at the Cannabis Cups, the community of like just dabbers and people in the solventless and loving to just hit their concentrates on a consistent basis. I have a few good buddies, and you met a few while you were down here. The amount of people, like, once they get into it, I haven't seen many like get back out of it and like just get back into growing flowers. They kind of get into it, they stay there, and they again, a lot of it is on the effect side, right? Because a lot of these guys have been medicating for a long time, and now dabs are, and they found that perfect terp or whatever it is, maybe on effect. But do you feel like we're in the middle of an evolution or a change in the way that we consume our end product? Like flower, you see the thing, or you said hash, for example, as far as the exportation. Do you think right now, as far as what you're seeing in the States a lot, you're traveling around the world a lot too, do you think we're kind of in a shift?
Yes, I mean it's been a shift. It's an emerging market shift, is what I'll call it. And I am definitely seeing a ton of people more intrigued by concentrates and wanting to learn more and wanting to consume more and consuming more. But there's also still those people out there that have heard of concentrates and they don't want anything to do with it. They're happy with their joint. They love their flower, or maybe they
Yeah.
tried to dab once and they got turned off by it. Maybe they took one of those 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit dabs and
Yeah.
got turned
Yeah,
off
no
by it.
doubt.
No wonder. But there's just, there's still people that just are pure flower smokers. I've
Yeah,
gone back and
true.
forth. I was at a point where I was smoking a ton of hash and tobacco spliffs, just pure hash and tobacco. And I was on
Right.
the heavier side of both of them. Like I was smoking 20 to 30 of these hash and tobacco spliffs a day, and it started affecting
No
my
doubt.
health.
Did that come from
Um,
your European travels?
yeah,
Just curious. Like,
yeah,
yeah, I was gonna say,
yeah.
no doubt.
And from German foreign exchange students living with me when I was a teenager.
So they're bringing
Um,
it to you as
yeah,
well. Okay,
yeah,
gotcha.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. The first time I ever smoked cannabis, it was with tobacco.
Right.
So Um, it became a health issue. I got some health concerns from smoking that much hash and tobacco. Now, obviously, I could have just gone away from the tobacco and just, gone straight into like smoking hash and flower out of a chillum or something, but it just wasn't what I grew up on. It wasn't what tasted right to me. So instead of just dropping, the spliffs altogether, I started migrating more towards flower and tobacco spliffs, and they actually started being a little easier on my throat.
Right.
Now, and I went for, I don't know, years where I barely smoked hash. I was smoking maybe once a week, even though I was making a ton of it and selling a ton of it. I was a flower smoker. But now, and even more so now that my wife is a huge dabber, I am dabbing a lot more. Now, not this week. I had some oral surgery recently and I'm like super high strung and not consuming right this second. I shouldn't say that. I'm definitely still consuming. I've had probably upwards of 1,800 milligrams of edible
I was gonna say
THC,
how the
but
edibles. Yeah.
now it's just the edibles don't even do it for me like a spliff does it for me. So I don't feel high at all, and I'm fucking 1,000 milligrams in already today.
Right. Wow. And just mellow. Like, how you feeling actually? Yeah. After a
No, I'm
thousand,
high.
because a
I'm high
thousand's a
strong. Sometimes, like in the beginning, when I
wow.
first started drinking these 1,500 milligram bottles, I was getting mellow, and it was slowing me down, allowing me to sleep. And now it's like, oh my god, I just want to be healed so that I can smoke weed again.
Oh,
Because
dude, I
like
can't
it's
wait
not
for
doing
that
shit.
for you.
Yeah,
I like you're making me want to just spark up for you right now, dude. Oh my goodness.
do it.
And I
Smoke
can't
out
wait to
first.
get here in a second. I want to talk about some of your favorite strains for as far as effects and extraction. But before we do, I think you touched on it a second ago, where as far as the history and our transition, the technology and following you on Instagram and following, some of the companies that you work with or consult for, seeing the technology explode over the last little bit. Let's first talk on like you personally and your work and your company. What kind of technology has advanced over the last little bit that have totally changed the game, the way you guys do solventless extraction? And then let's talk about a little bit on the home grow side, but starting with you and on the big end side.
Rosin presses, first and foremost. 2015 hit, and companies started turning the idea of a hair straightener into something larger and more scalable. That's when I believe the first two companies to come out with a rosin press, now they were glorified t-shirt presses at that time, were
Wow.
D-Nail,
Okay.
D-Nail USA, and Rosin Technologies.
Got you.
Now,
Okay.
Rosin Technologies came up with that offshoot of Aqualab Technologies right at the onset of that term becoming scalable. So, Rosin Technologies, not Rosin Tech, but Rosin Technologies and D-Nail were the first to bring out presses to us. So we got them.
Got you.
D-Nail was cool to us. I think they hooked us up with some free ones because we were already in this position where now we have one of the very few licensed hash labs in the United States that's protected.
Mm-hmm.
So when we reached out to a company, or when that company reached out to us, they were reaching out to us because they were like, we got to get one of our products into their hands because they can do this shit legally.
Yeah.
And we were reaching out
Right.
to them because we were like, hey, we're protected. We can do this shit and we can be loud about it. Like, you want to give us one of your presses so that we can promote you? So I don't know. It worked for both of us.
And how big were those presses at the time? Like,
those ones had
talking about,
pretty
again, first
wide
presses.
plates. We were barely using any of the plate at that time, but
Yeah.
the plates were pretty big because they were t-shirt presses. So they're like these
Right.
big, like, clamp style presses, and you really just use the force of whatever clamp or however they angle that
Okay.
clamp. So
Got you. So there was no actual, like, the in Espanol, like the gato, or what do we call that, like the tire jack or nothing like that yet? No actual pressure.
it was
It was
similar
still
to a
clamp.
tire jack because we use tire jacks with like a vessel in between
Yep.
two plates on a tire jack, before rosin presses existed. In fact, we would put those into our toaster ovens, drill a hole into the bottom of it, and we were making rosin before we really had a term for it. We just were calling it
Sick.
solventless hash oil back then.
Right.
But yeah, there were big presses that, I don't know. We're still evolving in the equipment side of things. So speaking of
Right.
continuing on this evolution, there's been so many little minor steps in the technology in the presses. But in 2015, I'm sorry, maybe rosin came out in, I don't know. My timeline gets a little jumpy, but in 2015, maybe rosin came out a little bit before that. 2015, we introduced the freeze dryers to the cannabis world.
Got
I'm
you.
always shouting out the people that I know to have shown me, and really to shown the rest of the world, these little tricks and trades. So big up Fletcher of Archive Seed Bank, because we were
Beautiful.
talking a lot at that time. We still talk. But he was messaging me like, hey, bro, I think I have this solution to removing all the water in the water hash. It sounds rad, man. Yeah, we're tired of microplaning. All of my employees hated me for making them do this super tedious microplaning technique because everyone had
Yeah.
carpal tunnel. I was hurting my employees.
Yeah.
And so that was music to my ears at the time. Someone's like, yo, we've got this product that we can use to remove water. I'm like, yes. So Fletcher was the first one to buy one of these. They were $7,500, $8,500 for these
Right.
scientific Harvest Right freeze dryers, which is like the first thing
And who
we
was
looked
using
to
them? It
get.
was like food processing
food
companies,
processing,
right?
dried fruit companies, and
Yeah.
space candy companies or whatever.
Shit for NASA.
Yeah,
Maybe.
exactly, for
Yeah.
like freeze dried food for space.
Yeah. Maybe the next pandemic, like some crazy shit going there to get a
Yes,
freeze
so
dry.
that's
Right.
actually the real true reason that Harvest Right exists, because they came
No
out
shit.
for the
Getting
the people that got really scared that the world
apocalyptic,
would end. Yeah, and they wanted to store things. Yes.
bunker, whatever, how many years worth of food,
Yes.
I forget the movies and the shit was
That
there, but yeah, I
group
get you. Yeah.
of people is what created the Harvest Right. It's Harvest Right is owned by Mormons in Utah. That same group of
That's
people
sick.
that are into that.
God bless him.
Yeah, no,
That's
I mean, I'm
awesome.
not mad about that part. Like,
Yeah, no
really,
doubt. That is sick.
I like the canning, and really, I just like people being self-sufficient. So for me, that's like
Right.
a cool self-sufficient, goal of mine. But
Yep.
the freeze dryers, they came out in around 2015 because one man had the balls to spend that money and try it. And he called me back that
Right.
next day and he's like, don't buy them. Tell everyone they're horrible and they ruin your product. Put some fire in there and it just burned up all the terps and ruined his product. And I'm
Right.
like, isn't there something you can control? Can't you like change the temperature? He's like, I don't know. I'm pissed. Then he
Yeah.
calls me back a couple of days later. He's like, bro, I think there's something to this freeze dryer thing, and I like it now. He's like, you can change the
Yeah.
temperature. I'm like, all right. If Fletcher
Yeah.
says it, and we were both making a lot of hash and selling a lot of hash to each other back then, and I was like, if this guy likes it, and I trusted him fully, I was like, I'm doing it. And so we went and bought like 4 of them right off the bat. We bought
Wow.
a bunch of them right off the bat,
Yeah.
and we went to work and we realized real soon, with some help from Fletcher and some other people that also went and bought these right off the bat, that they come out of the box, out of the factory at 125 degrees is the shelf temp. So if you just run it and press start right out the factory, you will burn up all your terps.
Right.
And so we realized that there was some playing we could do with these parameters, specifically on the scientific freeze dryer, which is the first ones we all bought because we thought that we needed to be able to play with all these different parameters. We started studying these things and learning about sublimation, the idea of removing water via sublimation is basically to freeze this water and hash slurry or this mixture completely frozen solid, negative degrees. Once it's frozen solid, then you can actually raise the temperature as you pull vacuum, and it creates this kind of wave pattern of dropping temperature to retain terpenes and to not have that product grease up, and raising temperature and at the same time pulling vacuum to only remove the water content in the hash. This was a huge, huge piece of equipment and technology that changed the game for water hash and solventless overall in general. A lot of
Right.
people, when rosin first came out, when people were making bubble hash in the licensed industry, a lot of people were getting in trouble. A lot of people were failing tests for mold and microbial and salmonella and botulism and stuff and scary things.
Right. Yeah.
And so a lot of the butane guys that were scared of us, solventless guys coming up, were like, no, solventless is dangerous, because we were all saying butane's dangerous because you guys are blowing each other up. They were saying solventless is dangerous because you're leaving water, and when you have water and plant material, you're making mold and microbial issues, growth issues.
Right.
And so my, combating remarks to that were, no, I'm removing all the water. But really, was I? When we were air drying, I was like, I'm air drying for upwards of 21 days. Now, that was overkill. 100% overkill, and or my environment wasn't proper, because you can really air dry if you have a proper environment, sometimes 24 hours if it's the right type of trichome. Some of those super greasy strains, it takes longer, sometimes upwards of 5 days, 7 days for
If you're
super greasy
microplaning.
straining. Yeah, if you're microplaning or
Gotcha.
sieving. But there was still definitely that factor, that risk, that now I've got plant material and I have water. If I have plant material and I have water, those two things combined in a sealed off environment, i.e. a jar, can create mold and microbial issues.
Yep.
I needed something to go into my SOPs or my standard operating procedures at some point around 2015. Probably before that, but the med and the health department were giving us a little leeway. But we needed something in our SOPs that showed the health department that we were mitigating the chance for mold and microbial. So when Fletcher came up with this freeze dryer into our space, I was like, this is it. This is what I'm going to put into my SOP and tell the med and the health department, this is the piece of equipment that mitigates the chance for mold and microbial. Now, if there wasn't any mold and microbial in the product to begin with, and my SOP also states that I won't take any product without COA, without test results.
Right.
So I won't take product in that has mold. And if I can mitigate the chance for that mold growing on my end, I think this is what the health department was looking for. So I wrote it into my SOP and I sent off this email like, hey, here's my edit to my SOPs. So anytime you made an edit to your SOPs, you had to email metric. Franwell and the health department, and I did it.
Oh, I've only heard about that. Yeah, I've only
Yeah,
heard about that nightmare though in that process.
I did it, and I think I was just overly proactive. I don't even know how many people actually do that and edit their SOPs. Really, I don't know anybody that actually keeps up with it.
Yeah.
But I did. I was so happy to have that badge and to have that license because I trapped my entire life and I didn't sleep at night and I had guns pulled to my head and I got robbed and I got, in trouble.
Right.
And I didn't want any more of that. I wanted to be normalized. So,
Yeah.
yeah, that,
For you.
that opportunity and that light bulb sparked, and I was like, oh, this is what they want. This is that line in my SOP that mitigates the chance for monomicrobial. We turned it in, and I never had a single issue. In fact, at some point
Wow.
in Colorado, around the time of the introduction of the freeze dryer, we got process validated for monomicrobial testing because we tested so many times in a row in a
Oh,
specific
that's cool.
amount of time without any problems that we got process validated, and then we only had to test once a year. We didn't have to test every
Ooh,
individual batch
that's
for monomicrobial, which saved us so much money.
no doubt. Yeah.
Yeah.
Just roughly how much is a test for each one of those tests?
Back, man, when monomicrobial tests first came out in Colorado around 2015, there were only a select few labs doing it, and they were charging more for it because there were only a few doing it. I want to say it was an additional 125 per product that you were testing. So you not only had to spend
Mm-hmm.
your $75, and eventually that price went down to like 35, and it fluctuates just like everything else. But when I'm thinking
Right.
2015 area esque, a regular potency test was $75. Then you had to add 125 for your motomicrobial. Then eventually they wanted a pesticide analysis, and you're looking at like $350 if you want to do all the tests that they were requiring.
Right.
And then everyone wanted a terpene analysis, and you're like, well, fuck, I'm not required to do it. So why am I going to spend another $100 if I'm not
I was
required to
just
do
about to.
it? So
Yeah, I
there
was
was
gonna
that
ask you because
weird
you're
gray
probably
area.
curious.
I wanted the
No
terpene
shit.
analysis on all the shit, but it came to a point where, like, fuck, I just spent $400 on a small batch of hash
Of
where
course.
there's only 38 grams of that variety of the 70
Yeah. No
micron that I
shit.
got tested. Doesn't make
No
sense.
shit.
Yeah.
Right, of course, dude. You're just throwing down so much value. And guys, throw down in the comments as well, please. If you're getting value for this, because I'm absolutely loving it, bro. This is, again, I'm so grateful you came out. I was hoping to get some slices like this from the history side because it's history in the making. It's happening in front of us. You are such a key piece to it, bro. It's so crazy, just what
I'm
you're
just
seeing,
blessed
the
to be here,
evolution
bro.
stuff. Dude, on the home grower side to talk about that, because again, like I'm slowly getting, I got my rosin press, right? Like my Q with our channel, my Grow Bro that we're with all the time, he's got the little bubble mixer. We got our basic gear, but what kind of stuff is coming over the last little bit that's revolutionary for like the solventless extraction for us home growers at home?
Hmm. Oh, I'd say one of the first things to really revolutionize water hash for the home grower are the introduction of RV washing machines to the cannabis space. So,
Got you.
as a home grower, over 10 years ago now, Mila was one of the first companies to sell an isolator or bubbleator machine because she called it isolator for the bags. But then when she started
Yeah.
getting into the automated agitation, her first machine, and I believe it's what she still calls her machines, and they've just had successions of edits or modifications
Yeah.
over the years. But hers is called the bubbleator. So when I first bought a bubbleator, that changed game for me because I was making hash
Right.
in Humboldt, California, or Mendocino, California, with a bamboo pole and a 55-gallon drum. And I
Right.
was
No
mixing
doubt.
away. And then when Mila came out with the 5-gallon washer machine, I was all over it. I was like, oh shit, I'm going to get two of these. And so I actually traveled to Amsterdam to buy one because back then she wasn't shipping them, and you could only really,
Right.
I wasn't seeing these, and I didn't know to look for RV washing machines back
So
then. So I
you
was like,
flew
fuck,
you
Mila.
flew to
Yeah, I
fucking
flew to
Amsterdam?
Amsterdam to go buy one of these in 2004. Yeah. This
Holy
is also the
shit.
same
Wow.
year that I purchased the papaya seeds that has made a huge uh, presence known throughout the United States. that
No
papaya
doubt.
from Nirvana that I initially bought in
Right.
2004 in Amsterdam from
That we're
Mila.
seeing now in a lot of crosses, and we're seeing
All
pop
over the
up
place,
just right now.
yeah. And
Wow.
now
No
other people
shit.
have bought those seeds and found their own phenos, of course. But one of those first phenos to really hit the States hard came from Nirvana seeds via Mila 2004 while we were hanging out. But
That's dope. Wow.
the washing machine. So 5 gallon
Yeah.
washing machine first, which was rad. I went to Amsterdam. I flew out there, and around that same time, she was selling a press, a really heavy duty press from Sweden or Switzerland. I can't remember exactly. It was fully stainless steel, 100% everything.
Yeah.
Was stainless steel on this hand press, this twisting. Maybe it was
Okay. Yeah.
Austria, Sweden, or
Uh,
Switzerland, but just really high quality. And so I not only wanted to get the bubble machine, the bubbleator, but I also wanted to get that hand press. And I was like, oh, I'll kill two birds with one stone. I fly out there, chop it up with Mila, hang out. Might have also been the year I brought my best friend Eric at the time, who since passed. So it was a
mm-hmm.
memorable year for me. And I get out there, I buy the bubbleator, we hang out. I buy the press as well, and I put the press inside the bubbleator and bubble wrap it really nicely and ship it out. But I didn't bubble wrap that press inside, which was really hard. It's heavy stainless steel.
Yeah.
So when it actually got to the United States, which it made it, it busted out the plexiglass poly plate,
Right.
see the vision window on this washing machine.
Yeah.
Busted out. And I was like, well, fuck, I got it out here. This is the only one that's in the U.S. Like, and it probably wasn't the only one. It was the only one I knew of. Other people, I'm sure, did this. But I'm like, shit, I broke it already. I was like, I'll figure something out. Find some marine Bondo or marine glue.
Yeah.
And
Like some
waterproof.
fish tank stuff?
Yeah, fish tank or boat epoxy, basically. It was boat epoxy. Clear drying boat epoxy. And I fixed that shit. And I ended up using this thing. I think I still have it. It's like it's a shrine for me now because I made so much
shit.
hash
That's going in a museum, bro.
Yeah, broken 5 gallon machine. Yeah, that 5 gallon machine I rocked for hella long. So that was a big advent, was the first automatic agitation. And since then, now we have full stainless steel versions and multiple different manufacturers making full automated washing machines. But those first ones were actually just purchased. They were RV washing machines, purchased and repurposed. No modifications were made to them. They were straight RV washers that people were buying by the pallet and reselling. I still buy them. I still use them. I like them. But as the industry progressed, the health department didn't like those. They are not food grade plastic, so in licensed facilities and yada yada yada. Now there's a nice niche for companies to come in and make fully scalable stainless steel commercial agitators.
So another question I had for you, brother, was what are the biggest things to consider when growing for extraction in mind?
First and foremost, genetics, the cultivar, the strain. That's the most important thing. Once you understand that all cannabis is not created the same, that each individual strain or cultivar has a different cannabinoid makeup, a different terpene ratio and profile, different size of the actual trichome heads and stalks, and different structures of those trichome stalks and heads, then you realize that cannabis is all about cultivar allocation. And concentrates are when cultivar allocation really shines. So when I say cultivar allocation, I'm talking about, I take a Blue Dream. I always use this one. Everyone says, oh, Blue Dream's played out, but it's still a great example.
Right.
Blue Dream has these really narrow, and there's different phenotype or phenotypical expressions of Blue Dream as well. But the Blue Dream that I know of has these really long, narrow stalks and really tiny pin drop heads, trichome heads.
Okay. Yep.
So Blue Dream looks pretty good in a bag because it's got a lot of these heads. So the surface area of trichomes is great. There's tons of heads, and sometimes those stalks are so long they intertwine. And when stalks intertwine, it makes bud look white. So it's got great bag appeal. So Blue Dream would do great as dry cured flower, cultivar allocation. Okay. You grow Blue Dream so that you can have dry cured Blue Dream flower.
Yep.
Blue Dream also works really well utilizing butane hash oil extraction. You get fairly good yields in butane hash oil, 15 percentile. If I go to take, and so at Blue Dream's height, you know, in the marketplace, we were getting what, $4,500 a pound for dry cured flower. We were getting top of the line prices on the butane shatter for butane. And so we go to wash it. And I get less than 1% yields, and it's just pure plant wax. And it's not melty, and it looks dark and kind of grayish brown and not light in color.
Wow.
And we're like, shoot, Blue Dream doesn't do well in water hash. Now, you're going to find outliers to this every time I, say something like this. Every once in a while, we had a Blue Dream get pollinated a couple of seasons back by some hemp, and it stressed that Blue Dream just at the right time in flower, and it made huge heads, and a lot of them, and I yielded over 5% from fresh Rosin and Blue Dream, where normally Blue Dream yields less than 1% and is not viable, does not look good, it won't press well. So this is what I mean by cultivar allocation.
Got you.
OG Kush is one of my favorite flowers ever. It doesn't do the best in solventless. It does great in butane. It has extreme oil content, so it actually does great in dried flower because its shelf life is amazing. And those are the things I think about. Oh, it's super oily and greasy. It's going to ruin my bags. I'm not going to collect any of it in the bags. I'm going to lose it all to the water, so it's not good for water hash. But because it's so greasy, it's going to hold that shelf stability longer, so it's great for dry cured shelf flower. And that greasiness also can be extruded via a chemical solvent like butane or ethanol or any of these other ones. And so it's great in that method. It just might not do the best in water hash. I still like it.
Got you.
Even if it's 2% yielding, I still want I still want OG Kush, water hash, and rosin. And now people are breeding to find that same terpene profile, similar highs, similar appearances that are actually washing.
Got you. On that topic, because that's so interesting, and I think, that's like to focus on one thing, that being the main thing, your cultivar, your strain. What are like 3 top strains that you've loved in your past experience? I'm sure there's so many, but what are 3 that pop off on the top of your head that have been traditionally really good? Again, it can be so different with which pheno you find or what's going on, but traditionally being said, what's up? What are 3 good ones that our extraction lovers here could be able to test out?
The first ones that come to mind for me are Chem D OG, and not Chem Dog, and not. There's so many things that it sounds like when I say that, but it's actually a specific cultivar from JJ of Top Dog Seeds, and it's a Chem Dog times, I believe it was like a triple OG. Maybe times another OG. I can't remember the exact lineage, but it's a Chem OG cross or hybridized variety. And we found a specific pheno of that did over 8% for us every time. So that's always on my list of washers. And in general, chems I like. They tend to be on the greasier side and not extremely high yielding, but the aroma and flavor really follows through with chems in solventless form. So Chem is at the top of my list. Gorilla Glue number 4, just to bring some, cultivars that are well known and are easily attainable in most markets. Gorilla Glue number 4, GG number 4 is on that list. Then one of the most popular solventless or washing cultivars that's really, really gained extreme popularity in the last 5 years, or maybe even 6 or 7 or 8 now, is GMO. Or garlic cookies, and there's a few other names and different, obviously hybridized versions of it at this point. But GMO is another heavy hitter. Those might not be my favorite, though. We were just talking about viable washing cultivars that a home grower could get a hold of and actually see a viability. Easy to grow, easy to wash. They're not losing all kinds of money by yielding less than 1% on something they grew just for washing. GMOs one of those bangers right now. But to kind of break it down, now for the last 10 years, really, we've been looking at yield data. Before 10 years ago, we didn't even know about, what to look for as far as yield data. But in the last decade, we've been looking at yield data. And now that I've taught tons and tons of people, and the people I've taught have now taught tons and tons of people. And now people are all
Yeah.
around the world are hearing about solventless and making their own rosin, which is amazing and beautiful. It's brought down the price. It's made it a lot harder to sell rosin if rosin is your main form of income. If selling rosin or
Yep.
making rosin is your main form of income, it's harder now. It's getting more saturated
Yep.
in most markets. And so what I'm looking for is not those 8% yielders, not those super heavy washers and pressers. I'm looking for very specific, unique terpene ratios and varieties where
Cool.
I just fall in love with that aroma and the taste. And if I can see
Yep.
at least 2% yields, if I'm in that 3% range, I'm super happy. Whereas back in the day, I needed at least 4% to break even and to see viability. Now it's like, no, where most of the market is looking for those 8%ers and they're barely getting $600 an ounce. I'm looking for 2%ers that have a unique terpene profile, and my price point has not dropped. Now, granted, I don't
Got
survive
you.
off of selling hash these days. I'm a
Yeah.
teacher. So I'm kind of the odd man out when it comes to that discussion because I'm
Yeah.
like, yeah, I'm not reliant on where the market is,
Right. Talking
fortunately.
on the topic of being a teacher, you're a really recognized, and there's definitely a lot of respect for you in this country here of Colombia. What's really cool, dude, is just to give you a little details. I have a big run coming of 12 plants, a nice little pheno hunt that I did, and with someone that attended your class, Alex Heisen's crew does some really cool
Yeah,
stuff on the extraction side, and then Santi from Rosin Bogota. I'm
Santi.
bringing them in as my experts in the episode to do a full. We're doing full wash. We're going to do a lot of stuff from like your teachings, and I'm letting them kind of handle that section of things, but. This is my first time doing it on the channel, and a lot of people going to be watching that episode are going to be asking this and curious about this. Is it worth it for us home growers that might only have 1 or 2 tents? And this was
I
my
only have one
reason
or
I've
two
waited
tents
for so
myself.
long to do a big, right? And I've waited so long. I'm like, no, dude, I'm running low on flour. I got to wait. I can't do that much into a test or this, but I'm doing it. I'm committing to it. So what would you say? Like, is it worth it to us smaller indoors? Like you said, you only got 1 or 2 that you're testing with and that. What would you say to us thinking about us testing with it? Is it worth it? We only have 1 or 2 tents committing that amount of plants into a wash run, or maybe just part of it. What are your thoughts on that?
Definitely play that back and forth. I talk to investors the same way. So listen, you dry and cure that tent, and what do you normally get out of it? And cut me off if you're not allowed to talk about this, but what do you normally get for that
Yeah.
weight wise, pound wise? How many pounds for one tent? What is say one
So
pound?
let's say like a good goal. We have a big run. Let's say on one of our medium size, we're gonna hit like a pound. You know what I mean? And it's like we might hit under that. But again, I think that's a good
A
reference
pound per
point for like a
plant,
goal. A big
or
no, not a pound per plant, but let's say a pound per that run. Let's say because again,
okay,
I'm doing small cycles and harvesting at different times. Let's say I have a full
okay,
batch harvested at that same time.
1 pound,
The easy numbers are gold. Yeah, one
perfect.
pound.
And how much you getting for that pound?
So everything here, again, Colombia, I'm not able to move any of those flowers. Everything gets put to the sake of science. So we're sending a bunch to lab. We're competing in cannabis
Yep.
cups. We're putting it into
Okay.
rosin extract. So none of that. I have no price comparison being here in Colombia to be able to answer that part of
Okay.
things. But it is a question for you being in the U.S. and everyone really being in the U.S. Listening to the show in Canada.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm just going to make a number for it, just for example sakes, not even for you,
Please.
So if somebody is
Yeah.
in Brazil, maybe let's use Uruguay because Uruguay is more accepted and legal, right? So let's
Yeah.
use Uruguay. Somebody's in
Yeah.
Uruguay and they're
Mm-hmm.
growing a pound in their tent and they're
Yep.
getting $1,200 a pound, random number.
Okay. Yep. Yep.
They take that same tent and they turn it into fresh frozen and they wash it and they get a 4% yield. And from that finished product, they sell those grams individually to their friends. They donate those grams individually to
Mm-hmm.
their friends for a membership fee that comes back to them for,
Yep.
I don't know, it's at $35 a gram. And now I'm horrible
Yep.
at quick math. But then you can kind of just do the math, so that round, normally I would get $1,200 off of that round, but instead I'm going to fresh freeze it and I'm going to sell it all per gram in hash. And I got $1,800. Maybe it was really
Got you.
viable for them at that, 4 percentile at their price per gram that the market's at. Maybe it's not. Maybe they got 2%. And their market doesn't even know what rosin is, so they can barely get $9 a gram for it. Because I'm seeing a lot of that in South
Right.
America and even in Colombia,
Yeah.
like talking to some of the boys in the
Just
Caucas, they're growing and making some fire, but their market is not as educated. So they're only getting
right.
$9 a gram, or the conversion to US dollar that would equate to
Yeah.
$9 a gram for some fire. Even the US kids are paying 35 for.
Yeah, totally.
Whatever it may be in that market, in that realm, I would do that math and I would compare it. Dry out around, cure it. What are you getting for it? Freeze around, make it into rosin. What does it equal? What makes sense on a financial level?
I like that. Yeah, and on my end, I guess what it would be, even here off this run, I kind of know more or less what I would do with 12 plants, how long I'd be able to have flowers here and hang out for and go to cups for. But now I'm going to be able to test on the consumption side, having that much. Like, I don't know what to expect from the 12 plant run. All the way, again, we want to go all the way to, we're going to go fresh frozen. Again, listening to your consultation from your students, let's see what we end up doing. But it's going to be kind of a test to see how long that lasts us. What are the effects like? We always do a post-harvest analysis where, we just test the effects. And of course, the effects from rosin are much stronger and much less. So it's going to be an interesting test on that. One last question I have for you, because you touched on it before we hop to the community question side of things, which I thought was really cool. We had a bunch of people obviously familiar with your work, your history, that have specific questions for you. But the one quick thing was fresh frozen. How big of a difference is it? Because I know you are literally one of the reasons fresh frozen is a thing. And how big of a difference? And should we be doing that no matter what?
So first and foremost, if you cut a plant down and freeze it immediately, that's basically what we're calling fresh frozen. Now, to break
Right.
that down further, we're big leafing it. We're taking all the big leaves, all the water leaves off the plant first. And then we're cutting the
Yep.
buds. If there's big, dense colas, we're going to actually cut them into smaller pieces without cutting through the
Yep.
plant material. From a technical side, we want to cut just stalks and go from the back of that large cola. That way we're not cutting in chlorophyll, leaching in chlorophyll into the product. But we're also creating
Got you.
smaller sizes for those large, dense colas to create more surface area, higher yields. Just
Ooh.
to break down fresh frozen briefly.
Yeah.
Fresh frozen contains about 75 to 85% water weight. And it's every
Mm-hmm.
time. There's not really going to be too many batches that are going to be under that unless you like really dried out the plant on the vine, like while it was growing before you froze it. It'll be under that
Yeah.
75%. Or if you really over watered and cut it while the plant's drinking, you might be over that
Right.
85%. But I've actually never seen anything over 85% water weight. So I also do that math. That's part of that investor math, or even the home grower math, really, is that water weight. If you have 80% water weight, you take a dry cured pound, and it would have actually been 4 pounds if it was
Right.
if it had all that water weight. Or your fresh frozen pound is really only a QP if if you dried and cured it, if that makes sense. So
Right.
you
Right.
also want to take that
Yeah.
into account. But from a quality standpoint, the difference between dried material doing an extraction or a solventless separation and fresh frozen is just night and day. If you get it
Right.
right at the right point, if you're trimming dry and it's kind of gooey still, you can still see some viability. You can retain a lot of those terpenes, you can retain a lot of the color, but once it gets like powdery dry, you're going to have a darker product. Your product's not going to smell as good because you've lost a lot of those air volatile terpenes at that point.
Yeah.
So there's also some differences there, whether it's super bone crispy dry, you're going to have a bad day. Whether it's kind of gooey dry, you might do okay. And fresh frozen's really
Yep.
the epitome of retaining as many of those air volatile terpenes as we can. Now, there's some people that'll
Got you.
even hang dry for 2 days or 5 days and then freeze. And they're saying, oh, my yields are so much better. But they're still doing kind of the weight off of as if it contain 75 to 85% water weight. With even 24 hours of a hang dry, you've gotten rid of 50% of that water weight at least. So
Gotcha.
the math
Right.
changes slightly. One of the benefits, though, to hang drying before you freeze, so hanging for a day for a strain like OG Kush that's super dense, it actually opens up
Yeah.
a little bit of that surface area by drying it a little bit before you freeze it, and your yields do
Gotcha.
increase slightly on a cultivar like OG. It's just not like drastically, like some people are like, oh, I got 20% yield on a fresh frozen run, and it's like, no, that wasn't fresh frozen. That was hung
Yeah.
dry for 24 hours and then frozen. It's the difference. I
Gotcha.
like to break it down and be nitpicky about it.
I love it, dude. The detail that you go into and the amount of things that you brought to the table, it just changes every single time. Each level from, dude, just the fresh frozen to the actual. I always think of it in Spanish, iofilizador, the freeze
I
dryer.
love that you,
It's
I
just,
love that you think about it in Spanish.
yeah,
I need to
yeah, it
start thinking
sucks.
about
That word's
things in
hard
Spanish.
in Spanish. But dude, before we go to our community questions, let us know obviously where we can find you. I'm going to throw that up on the screen with your Instagram, your website, all that kind of stuff. But what kind of events do you have coming up as far as courses? Where are you going to be? Where can we find you over the next little bit that we should check you out?
So a lot of the group educational courses are selling out really fast. There is one coming up in Maine. Um, Really, it's like next week. It's April 7th and 8th in Portland, Maine, that has a
Mm-hmm.
few seats left right now. And
Yep.
that's a collaborative effort class with Dread Pirate, who will be handling the BHO, and I will be handling the solventless side of things. And it's a
Sick.
crossover event. It's 2 days. Portland, Maine. Did I say Portland, Oregon? Portland, Maine.
Yep.
Our host is Pamo Lab. We have a ton of sponsors. We're truly appreciative of all the support. It's why we can do this. Our back end is
Heck
really
yeah.
tight and nice on this one. So thank you to Kat and Mel, Melissa, and Mel. We've got a few Mels. Just
Hey,
amazing back
sick.
end support on this one, which is new for me. I'm used to doing all my own production and everything. I just had
Awesome.
my first essential education group class, which sold out and it went extremely well here in Colorado this just past weekend.
Sick.
And then at the end of April, we've got Michigan Essential Education on the calendar. It also sold out. Um, I will be in Missouri for the KC Canafest and the Rosin Bowl the middle of April, and I'll be DJing, judging, and speaking on a panel out there in Kansas City, Missouri. Right
Yep.
from there, I'm in the Canary Islands for the Canary Champions, judging a
Ooh,
cup
that's
out there
sick.
in paradise, giving thanks.
Yeah.
And
Right.
from that event in the Canary Islands, I come back to Denver for a day, I think. And then I fly to Michigan for the Essential Education Michigan. I'm all over the place. I think we've
That's
got,
sick, dude.
what else is on the books? There's some Berlin event coming up, an expo in Berlin, and a
Awesome.
few new spots for
No, we got
me.
quite a few people out in Europe too.
Yeah, a few new
That's
spots for me.
awesome, dude. And the best place to be able to check out any updates or where you're throwing that stuff out is at your Instagram. Would that be correct?
Yeah,
Stories and
my
that kind of stuff?
Instagram stories are the main little niche. I
Yeah.
also try to feed the main events to my websites, which are going to be
Mm-hmm.
essentialextracts.ca. You'll generally see like a banner up at the top of that website, which will feed you to the next landing page where I'm dropping tickets for an event. You can also check out nicktanum.com. It's another personal landing page, which will feed you to a various number of other events, sponsorship
Heck yes.
opportunities, tickets, YouTube videos, name it.
Dude, I wish we got to talk about the music side of things. And I think at some point we're gonna have to bro down, do this again, because it's just such an interesting part of you. And we didn't get to even check it out in Cali when we were at the event. I know something happened with the event and we don't have to go there right now, but I can't wait to be able to check that part out too live, dude, with your music.
Yeah, man. Speaking of music, I actually recently put up a new mix for the first time in a decade.
Heck
So
yeah.
the first new mix in a decade I put up on my YouTube, so you can take a look at Selecta Nikka T on YouTube, I believe. If you
Yep.
search
I'll throw
Nikka
it up on the
T,
screen right
you
now.
should be able to find it. As well as I just did a really, really fun, unique, more upbeat piano influenced set, which is more melodic Afro house style of music.
Sick. Hell
And I
yeah.
DJ that at my buddy's cultivation, their legal licensed large scale cultivation in southern Colorado.
Ooh.
It's called Indico. And if you look up Indico on YouTube, go to their YouTube page and check out my Amapiano set in the garden, because that was a fun one.
Dude, that's sick. And so that's like an actual video set, live set that we could like check out, you know, like, oh, that's sick, dude. I'm going to be throwing that on in the background. I know while we're doing, you know, some garden work or something. That's absolutely amazing, dude.
It'll keep energy
really
up.
cool.
Like, it's a nice, lively one.
Heck yeah, dude. I can imagine with a few, you know, a few little dabs, throw some Nikka T in the background, bro, you know, get some sets going. That's going to be absolutely amazing. Let's jump into the community side of things. I got a few questions. They're actually really cool, dude, because as you know, I'm sure you get this all the time when you go to events. There's a lot of people that have been affected by your work, and a few people directly here from the community have some questions. So the first one being from Trichome.expressions. And this one is really cool because they want to know tips for someone absolutely obsessed and possessed with washing and post-processing. You know, any ideas, tips or tricks, places to go, things to watch, whatever just comes to your mind on these questions as we go through the community. What would you say to those obsessed and possessed, Nikka T?
Oh, man, that's a huge, broad question. But tips and tricks for somebody who's very well-versed, I would say try to get as much material as you can under your belt, because each cultivar is going to perform differently. So even if you're extremely well-versed in washing and post-processing, play with unique cultivars. Find things that surprise you. Get your breeder friends to breed for things specifically for you. That's what I would focus on right now.
Nice. Yeah, good call. Another one here from Daddy Does Dabs. Shout out to you, brother. I love this. This is best advice for a small home grower to go from seed to rosin, which we've talked on a lot of things throughout this, but anything else that comes out to mind right now? Any tips for us home growers to go from seed to rosin?
Yes. Cleanliness, sterility is
Beautiful.
one of my first tips. If you're a home grower and home extractor, you better have a space designated to this process. If you don't, I'm sorry, but you should do this at your buddy's house and be a home grower and home extractor at your homie's home. But you really need that designated clean space, because if you have an animal or anything of the sort, hash is sticky as hell, and dust in your environment will be attracted to that hash, and that will affect the quality of your end product. So keep a clean, sterile environment and watch for cross-contamination. So even if you're going from packing bags of raw hash out of your freeze dryer to pressing, that raw hash, even though it's hash, it can be a contamination as well. Right. So if you get that raw hash on the outside of your press bag, and then you put that press bag into your parchment paper, you're not only going to be extruding the rosin that comes from inside that trichome head, you're going to now be flowing with that rosin waterfall. You're going to be flowing some raw heads. And you might not notice it until 2 weeks later, and you get into your cold cure jar, and you look at the bottom and you see a black dot or 2 or 3, and you're like, what is that? Why is there dots in there? And generally speaking, it's because some raw heads got in there or some other contamination. And those raw heads oxidize a lot faster than rosin, and they start turning darker than the rosin. And that's one of the biggest things that I see on my consults is a cross-contamination issue. So definitely keep that in mind. Cleanliness, cross-contamination. And then the third thing I want to touch on is environmental control. So it will be very, very difficult to produce quality products if you don't have proper environmental control. Temperature and humidity are your two main factors you're dealing with. When I'm talking about temperature, you're going to want to have different temperatures depending on the process and the room that you're in. So for washing, I like to be around 44 degrees. Now, that might be almost impossible in Colombia to find a room unless you've got a friend with a commercial walk-in freezer.
Right. Okay. Got you.
But ideally, you want to be as low as 44 degrees because you're going to get certain cultivars like Grease Monkey that do really well. They yield well, but they're greasy as hell. And unless you're below 50 degrees Fahrenheit, all that hash is going to grease to all your equipment. You're going to lose a lot of that hash to your equipment. You're going to oxidize that hash faster because you're trapping moisture when you go to dry that greasy hash. And there's just a lot of
Yep.
issues that come from not having that proper temperature control. Obviously, if you
Got
don't
you.
have the proper humidity control while you're pressing, you can bring water into your rosin just via atmosphere. And you can create rosin that, when dabbed, creates some sparkles and sounds, snap, crackle, pop. Because you've trapped water due to your humid environment. So, an issue that we saw in
Right.
Jamaica. But if you pump enough AC into a room, you can remove that humidity as well. So that's the trick that I have for home growers in humid
Right.
environments: is pumping AC. Pumping AC will naturally
Dude.
draw out humidity as well.
That's sick, man. A lot of that just comes from, like what you said in the first tip, as far as putting in the time, getting as many washers on your belt as possible. And, that's amazing, and saving a lot of people a lot of time just by listening to those three when it goes from seed all the way to rosin. The next one is great because I know it's a super quick, simple, and you talk about it a lot in the videos. If you watch anything with Nikka T or any of the videos on anywhere with it, we talk about the carpal tunnel days, or you mentioned that. So this question is basically, this comes from Joaquin Iritate 99. I hope I said that right, brother. The best way to dry bubble without the freeze dryer.
Best way I found is creating environmental control. So if you can create a room that's below 60 degrees, realistically, ideally, you want that room to be below 50 degrees. Between 45 and 50 degrees is a really nice, proper temperature, and below 40% RH. And dry on baking sheet racks or something that really creates some air movement and flow.
Yep.
And dry not directly on those baking sheet racks. Put some parchment paper on those baking sheet pans, and put your hash on the parchment paper. Put the pans on the racks. Sometimes I just brush through all that stuff, but yeah, in a dark, dry, low RH environment. That's yeah, dark, dry,
As
cool.
easy as it.
Sorry,
Yeah,
dark, dry,
simple.
and cool environment.
Got you.
Yeah, that's going to be the best way.
Beautiful.
Oh, and there's multiple methods to get there. One being a sieve, one being a microplane, and one being a business card, if you will. Out of those three methods, a sieve is one of the more popular methods. Mila kind of really pushed out that method. I think it's
Yep.
great if you have a real greasy strain. It's kind of recongeal, and you're going to have oxidization issues and yada yada yada. I think that really, once Matt Rise brought the microplane to the world, that's kind of more the direction I went pre-freeze dryer, to create
Yep.
more surface area for those super greasy strains. So I prefer at this point in time the microplane, but unless you're in a cold room, it's going to be really hard to microplane. It's also going to be really hard to
Right.
sieve. So that's why we've moved on to these freeze dryers.
Gotcha. And when you say hard, it would be hard because it just becomes sticky,
Yeah,
sick,
it
and
just it'll
everything like
stick
that
to
kind of.
everything. It'll start bubble gumming. Now
Right.
you've got a sticky mess to your
Shit's
spoon,
stuck to your
to your
phone.
sieve,
It's
and you haven't
yeah.
dried or separated anything. So yeah,
Right. No doubt. That's
it
awesome.
happens
Okay,
to
so our
me.
last
Like
one here.
I am not the god of hash where I can just instantly, because I've done these demos in rooms that are 75, 80 degrees, and they're like, okay, like now it's time to pull from the bags, and I'm like, no, I'm not doing it. You guys do that. You didn't provide
Right.
the environment that I
Yeah.
asked for, because it's going to make me look bad. Yeah.
Right, no doubt. I can imagine, especially being on the road, being in countries like Colombia, depending on what set you get given at that time. I can only imagine. So our last one here I thought was really good. You can spend as much time and go deep as you'd like to, or just give us, a straight up answer. But this one is from, again, Daddy Does Dabs. Thank you for writing this one in because I like this. And this is on the environmental impact of washing versus dry sift. Again, go as deep as you like to on that part. And is there extra quality, is the actual extra quality worth the purified water required?
I like the question. I like it a lot. It's jabbing at some people for sure. I'm not easily
Mm-hmm.
jabbed, but I love the question. So I'm going to first start out by, to do normal dry sift, you must dry
that flower to a point where you can break off those heads easily. Now, there's very few people, and there is technology surrounding around frozen sift, which would be fresh frozen sift, which is a whole different story,
Okay.
but it's so few and far between of people even playing with that method, so few and far between
Yeah.
cultivars that will actually do it. So we'll skip that for right now. Normal dry
Yeah.
sift, you have to dry out properly to be able to sift it. Once you've dried it out to that point where you can actually sift it to a viable form, you've lost so many of those air volatile terpenes. You've gotten a darker color. And in most markets, unfortunately, color is a huge factor. So unless you've got that specific grow, because I have seen them, they exist. It's just a lot harder to find that specific grow that produces a type of hardened off, stable, dry sift head that also retains the terpenes and the color. Like I said, it's out there. It's just a lot harder to find. Then I'm staying away from sift. Unless you can find that, I stay away from sift. Yes, there's an environmental impact on the ice that we use, the cooling temperatures that we use, and the water that we use, of course. But for that quality exchange, I get this question all the time. I prefer water hash,
Right.
and I prefer live rosin compared to dry
Right.
sift or sift rosin.
Got
But there's
you.
a few cats.
No, I think
I still have to stick up for those few cats. There's a cat in SoCal who showed me some of his dry sift rosin, and it's fire, and it's terpy. And he has this one cultivar that's just very volatile in a good way, and you pop that jar, and it's loud. So no complaints there. He found it. You know what I mean?
Right. No doubt. Dude, thank you so much, Dan, for diving into that one. Because, yeah, I seen that pop up on the Instagram, and I was like, this is a really interesting one. I think this is an interesting topic, especially in the moment of time we're in right now. It's just,
I like
there's so many things being talked about outside of, like, in that topic outside of cannabis. So thanks for diving into that, bro.
To talk about that on a large scale, there is a company that's now expanding rapidly, and it's like a group of guys that have kind of combined to create this new cryo company. But they are now going out and harvesting entire large-scale fields via like a witch's brew style, large-scale, fully commercialized. They're doing ones in the field, and now they have a huge facility. I think it's Southern or Central California that it looks like a big plant, like a big chemical plant,
right?
Where they're doing huge, large-scale, raw, crude separations, and it's solventless really at this point because they're just utilizing the CO2 or it's not utilizing CO2 in a closed system. I don't know how to describe it. Look into it. Straight concentrates is involved, and they are doing dry sift on a huge scale. I think that it's better for creating allocations towards raw products that then go into edibles and topicals or whatever you may do from that point of a crude extraction. But from a scaling standpoint, dry sift 100%.
Dude, thank you so much for your time, bro. I was looking to like hang out and jam for an hour. We got so deep. You hit on so many amazing points, man. And I've had you here for like an hour and a half. So I just want to thank you so much for coming out and sharing this with our community, brother.
Yeah, man. It's a pleasure, bro.
Dude, I appreciate everyone listening, guys. Do not forget to share this. Share this with one of your grow bros that is interested in, bubble, in extraction, in whatever it may be, or thinking about getting into it. Share the love. And this is how everything started. Everything that was shared today was absolutely beautiful, and all started from there. Do not forget as well, guys, to go and share that love with Nikka T's profile on Instagram. Everywhere you see him on social media, share that love, guys, because you didn't have to take the time to share this, but you did it. For me, I had some little major breakthroughs here today, and I hope a lot of the viewers tuning in did today as well, guys. So make sure you smash that like button, share the podcast on whatever platform you're listening to, and thanks again, guys, for tuning in to Homegrow TV.